Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Christopher Bradbury, and Chris is the principal at Northholm Grammar School in New South Wales here in Australia. Love having a chat with other Aussies. Also, not to say anything against our guests from elsewhere in the world, but it is always a lot of fun to chat with an Aussie. Chris, welcome onto the show.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, first of all, can you tell us a bit about Northholm Grammar and what you do as principal?
Thank you, Jono. Northholm Grammar is in a semi-rural setting in northwest Sydney. The school is essentially nestled in the Hill Shire and the Hornsby Council area. We're a small independent school of 490 students from kindergarten through to year 12. It's an all-through school, meaning that our primary years and our secondary years are on the one campus. Which is a terrific advantage because it allows us to be quite strategic in terms of our educational approach and philosophy. And we have strong continuity in terms of our staff working closely and collaboratively together in both the primary and secondary settings. It's a co-educational school. The four school values are learning through scholarship, caring for others and self, living a faithful life and contributing to the community. Northholm Grammar, by design, when it was founded in 1983, was committed to being a small independent school that could deliver a level of care that differentiated from larger entities, and a school that would focus on academic excellence through scholarship, pastoral care, looking after the well-being of all students, and having a dynamic co-curricular program so that we could ensure that all our students would be able to experience a holistic, broad education.
Yeah, wonderful. What a great snapshot. Thank you for giving us such a wonderful sort of snapshot of Northholm Grammar. Now I'd love a bit of a snapshot of Chris as you look back, even as far as childhood, as you look back, what are some of those moments when you were younger and maybe a bit later through your career that you look back at and think, wow, that really shaped me becoming the leader and the person that I am today?
Yeah, look, it's a little bit boring reflecting on my upbringing in the sense that I always wanted to be a teacher. I was very passionate to pursue that career option. When I was in primary school, 5 and 6, I wanted to be a primary teacher. And then once I entered year 7, I was committed to wanting to be a secondary years teacher, which is where I moved to. And I did consider journalism and law, but I always had a real passion for teaching and to move into education. And I think when I reflect back and look at my schooling days, I love school. I really enjoyed it. I was able to develop a number of friendships that I still maintain today, which I think is incredibly important. And I tried as best as possible to get involved in everything that school had to offer. So I love sport. I played a lot of rugby league and cricket, and I was involved in debating and public speaking. I had the opportunity to be school captain, which was a tremendous opportunity. And I think those particular experiences really helped in developing the person that I've become. So moving into education, there was a real strong commitment to, first and foremost, in being the best possible teacher I could be, but secondly, that I could be involved in as much of the school experience, the school life, and coach rugby league and coach cricket and mentor in debating and public speaking. And I was particularly fortunate looking back that through my experiences in rugby league, I had the opportunity to coach the junior representatives for the Parramatta Eels in the Harold Matthews. And I did that. Yeah, I did that during my 20s, and I found that to be just a really defining experience in terms of pursuing my passion of rugby league. But I learned a lot about leadership, and I learned a lot about, first and foremost, working with the players, but also working with the parents and the organisation itself.
Yeah, wonderful. That's I'm a big sports fan. I love rugby league. For those outside of Australia, rugby, well, you've got rugby union and you've got rugby league. And I don't know how else to really explain it outside of Australia, because you've got different countries that play different versions of the sport. But it's a very big sport here. And the NRL, National Rugby League, and Parramatta is one of those teams. Which is that your local team where you're based as well, Chris?
That's right. I was coaching at my former school, Patrician Brothers Fairfield, which
Yes.
was in the Parramatta district, and yeah, support the team and the local area.
Amazing. Yeah. And is that school that you previously worked at, do they do quite well in the junior competition? The name rings a bell from me watching some of the junior rugby league sort of some of those schoolboy sort of competitions. It rings a bell. Is that where I would have heard it from? Do they do quite well in that competition?
You know your schoolboy rugby league history well, because Patrician Brothers Fairfield with St Gregory's Campbelltown
Yes.
were the two premier schools in rugby league pretty much throughout the 70s, 80s and the early 90s. And I was fortunate to be at Fairfield during that time. And yeah, rugby league was the premier sport.
Ah, amazing. Yeah, there you go. I thought that's where I recognized the name of the school from. Amazing. So I want to chat more about your story, but let's zoom in on this experience you had as a coach, because I can't help but ask about that because I find it so interesting. What were the biggest lessons you learned from coaching that team, particularly in such a a high level, like and high stakes young sporting competition? What were some of those lessons that you learned that you now might apply also in as a principal and school leader?
I think on reflection, one of the great lessons is your role as a coach in developing talent, but developing the team. And when you're coaching at that particular level, you're blessed with a number of players who are incredibly talented. So you're working tirelessly to improve their individual game, but there's so many factors that come into play in terms of how you're able to mould a team and how the collection of that individual talent can come together. And as a result, work together to be able to win matches and obviously be highly competitive in terms of taking out the premiership. So it was really a case, I think, of learning the importance of preparation, of vision, the importance of inspiring players to be the best players that they could be, but also the best versions of themselves. So that meant developing a strong culture of punctuality, pride in the club, pride in the team, and then developing the skills of deliberate practice and taking on feedback. And as a coach, being able to form a strong coaching staff and a coaching team environment as well, so that I was working very closely with the strength and conditioner and my assistants and our manager and trainers, so that we were constantly growing and improving throughout the journey and the process to be the very best team that we could become.
Yeah, I love chatting about this because I think, and I've mentioned this a few times in the podcast, the biggest thing I've learned from this podcast, and I do learn a lot. I feel like it's the ultimate, you want like the ultimate sort of education in an area, do a podcast where you chat to people about that. And for me, I'm learning from leader after leader, and it's so great. The thing that comes up again and again is that great leaders really see their people and their team as not there to support them and help them do X, Y, or Z, but they see their role as to support their team. And that's what I like about a sports coach, is because your coach is very much winning the championship through those players. It's not about the players helping them. It's about them getting in and supporting the players. And it's funny what you've mentioned. There's so much of that I can see straight away how you go from rugby league to school leadership, and really, let's be honest, any leadership, and there's great crossovers and parallels, and that would have really helped you to grow as a leader from having that experience.
Oh, that's definitely the case. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with the importance of people. Great teams in sport, great teams in business, great teams in schools are a product of leaders paying real attention to the people within their team. And I think it's just so important that that leadership in general is about connecting with people, ensuring that they have a real sense of belonging within that environment, and that you're constantly checking in and you're constantly demonstrating to players or students or colleagues that you care and that you're invested in them, and hopefully that you have the influence to allow them to realise that they're part of something quite big and unique.
Yeah.
And they can play a special role in that particular process. I think that's incredibly inspiring and uplifting.
Yeah, I love what you mentioned there about caring. And one of my favorite ideas is in the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott, and Kim talks about a plot of 4 quadrants, and on your left, your vertical axis is how caring you are as a leader, and your horizontal axis is how much you challenge. And the idea of the book is, she says, you want to be in the top right quadrant. And what does that mean? It means the bottom left quadrant is a leader who doesn't care enough and also doesn't challenge enough. The top left quadrant is a leader who cares intensely and shows that to their people, but fails to challenge them. And in the bottom right quadrant is a leader who challenges their people, but fails to care for them and doesn't care for them. And up top right is radical candor. And that's what you just mentioned, which I love, which is, and I think this is a great question for leaders to ask themselves, is what am I doing, which you just described in a great way? How can I care for my people? How am I checking in with my people? If I'm listening to this going, John, Chris, I care deeply. Well, do your people know? How much are you caring for them? But then the flip side of that as well, which once again, the sports is interesting because there's no other domain. That's why we love sports, right? There's no other domain that so clearly shows you who is winning or losing in terms of, measurability is sport. It's 10-3, 10. Well, that would be a strange score. It's 10-6. And that would be, that you've lost. And so no matter how much you care, there would always be, I think that's something that you get in sport is naturally, and it attracts people and who want to compete and to be challenged. But it's about that top right quadrant, where I care deeply and my people know that I care deeply and I challenge them intensely. And by being in my team or in my school or under my leadership, they know that I've got their back and I care about them, but I'm also challenging them every day.
It's a really nice way of articulating that point. And I think one thing that I've learned in leadership is that with those check-ins and in terms of caring, frequency trumps quality. I think sometimes we can get a little bit preoccupied that we have to set up the meeting and we have to have a half an hour or 45 minutes, which at times we do. We have to do that. But one of our goals this year as a school within our staff and our middle and senior leadership is that that we understand the teams that are established within our organisational chart, but that each leader touches base with each of their members of their team once a week, and it's just a simple check-in of how are you, what are your priorities this week, how can I help? And there will be larger meetings over the course of the term and the year, but if every leader at Northholm Grammar is able to get to each of their team members, and then that translates to teachers. If our teachers could get to every student, just a quick conversation. How are you? What are the key priorities? What are the key areas that you're working on this week? How can I help? I think that's incredibly powerful, and that contributes to a really healthy work environment.
That's fantastic. You reminded me of something, and I cannot remember the source of it. Otherwise, I would honor it, because it definitely doesn't come from me, but it's this idea. And I feel like there's a piece of research behind it, which is why I wish I could remember where I heard it, but it was talking about celebrating the wins. And it was exactly the same idea that you just said, which is why I sort of lent in when you mentioned it, because I was like, oh, that's such an interesting idea that it applies here as well as there. But when it comes to celebrating the wins, the idea, and I believe some research behind it was saying, look, celebrating regularly, it's actually the frequency with which you celebrate. It's the frequency with which you even reward. I think it was talking about rewarding and celebrating the wins will trump the quality of the reward and the quality of the celebration. And it holds us back because we think, oh, I don't want to say in passing about blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, it's the same thing there. It's like, if we can make it a habit and increase the frequency of how we celebrate our people, in celebrate those small wins, point out those behaviors. It's about the frequency. And it's funny how true this idea is, that frequency can trump quality, because it's the same with accountability. It's not about having these big, that's why I struggle with performance management quarterly meetings as when it's not done well because the person doesn't see you for 3 months. And then all of a sudden you're having this one big meeting. It's like, once again, the quality of that meeting is trumped by frequent accountability, little pieces of feedback given in the moment, specifically about a situation regularly, trumps big, brilliant, clever performance management meetings and encouragements and plans.
Oh, that's so true. And I think, just as you've pointed out, the celebrating the wins with great frequency, so too commiserating the defeats, and hopefully there's not many of those. But I think that with any journey, that's within schools or business or in sport, it's so important that when we make mistakes, or when there's particular aspects of our targets that we don't meet, that we do commiserate that well, and that we learn from that experience, and that there is that level of support that's provided to players and coaches and staff. And I think the performance piece, that's one that is subjected to ongoing research, and rightfully so, because we've got 360-degree feedback processes and we've got appraisal systems. But I do like a suggestion that was made by Marcus Buckingham, who really simplifies the performance management process, where he indicates that essentially 4 times a year a leader should ask 4 questions about a team member.
Yeah.
And one of those questions is, or the first 2 are actually on a scale of 1 to 5. So the first is, I always turn to this person when I need extraordinary results, 1 to 5, 5 being great. I choose to work with this person as much as I possibly can, scale of 1 to 5. And then the last 2 questions are yes or no questions. The first being, this person should be promoted today, yes or no? And this person has performance problems I need to address today, yes or no? And I really like that framework, because performance management is essentially, it's a feeling, it's a perception. We're conveying to someone what we feel and what we see and what we observe about their performance. And we can sometimes get bombarded with ticking boxes and giving ratings for a whole multitude of aspects within a leadership role. And essentially people are going to be very good at most and developing in others. But I think those 4 areas, I think they hit the spot in terms of, if this person's achieving great results and I want to work with them as much as possible, and I would promote them today, well then that's where you act. How are you continuing to grow that particular person, and what is the career trajectory for that particular colleague? And if you're answering at a point of considering giving a performance review that you're having performance problems, well, hopefully you've been addressing those with the colleague, but sadly too often people haven't. So I think simplifying that process of review, and again, I think that can become a lot easier with the frequency of conversations.
Yeah, I've never heard of those questions before. I love that that framework. That's great. Particularly that idea of what was the first 2 questions is. Can you just say what those first 2 questions are again, because they're so good?
Yeah, I always turn to this person when I need extraordinary results. And I choose to work with this person as much as I possibly can. And the beauty of it is that it's the coach or the leader telling their reaction. So it's their personal reaction to the person's impact and influence, and you're actually making it about you, because that's what you can reliably count on in terms of the level of that contribution. So I think there's a number of real positives in terms of simplifying the process. And if colleagues realise, well, that's quite straightforward, those 4 areas. At the end of the day, I do want to achieve extraordinary results, and I want to be a person that everyone wants to work with. So that in itself provides a fantastic foundation to build on in your daily practices and routines.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. I've loved chatting about the rugby. I'll ask you one more question. I can't help but ask this. It popped into my head when you were talking about coaching, and I've always been fascinated by this. How did you find it as a coach of a sporting team how did you deal with fantastically skilled players who maybe sometimes didn't display other behaviors or team buy-in and really putting the team first? How did you manage that? That's always something with sport that I've watched with interest. How did that play out as a coach, and how did you manage that if you ever had a player who was exceptionally skilled but for the other reasons wasn't doing great in terms of putting the team first? How do you manage that as a coach? What did you do?
I think that was one of the great experiences, being involved in the junior representative program, and that differentiates a little to the senior levels, because it was very much about the education of 16, 17, 18-year-olds in their development as rugby league players, but also as men of character. So we talked a lot about those key values and principles that were important. And that's going back to the areas that I addressed earlier: the pride in the uniform, respect and manners. Whenever we entered the classroom for a review session, you always took your hat off. We had a practice that the players stood when another adult had entered the room, and that wasn't necessarily a coach, that was any member of the organisation. And we actually implemented quite strong policies that if a player was caught committing a misdemeanour outside of rugby league, then they wouldn't play. There would be a suspension. So we were very strong in terms of the importance of the representative aspect. You're representing the Parramatta Eels, and I think the key developmental area there was that, as a coach, you had to be very honest and transparent in terms of what your expectations were. And quite often you'd have some robust conversations with a player who knew that they were very good, but they may have been playing more of an individual style game rather than a team game. And as a result, you then had to make an assessment of, this player is a great player, but not great within the team environment. And I think openness, I think transparent conversations, and giving very clear feedback in terms of what optimal performance and optimal behaviour looked like was a key to success in terms of fostering a really strong culture on and off the field.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for answering that. That's something that I've been wanting to ask, and probably something I'll ask anyone who's had any experience coaching a sporting team, because I find that a really fascinating leadership conundrum, and particularly at senior levels. Interesting to hear you make that distinction, because I've watched. My number one sport is soccer, football as they call it in the UK. And recently there's been some examples. My team in England is Manchester United, and we have, one of the two best players in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo. And yet it's been, as of now in 2022, the team just can't quite gel and break through, even though it's one of the most expensive teams. And it's an amazing testament to, when they've been beaten recently by some teams that are worth a fraction of the price, but the team has gelled. And then you've got a player named Aubameyang who was at Arsenal, a club, and has left, and solely left saying my only issue was with the manager, a guy named Mikel Arteta. And it's just interesting to watch. I don't know the details, but watching and seeing, and he was a legacy, like a fantastic, he's left a great legacy in terms of goals and performance. And yet there was something there, and I don't know the details, that meant that he left this club, and he left really the manager. And I just find, because of these leaders, it's different to school leadership. It's different to any other leadership, some of these top level sporting coaches, because you have such a limited time frame. You're really sometimes, and the NRL here in Australia is a bit like that. If you're not performing after 10 matches of taking over a team, you can get the sack.
That's right. Well, it's that high performance culture where the expectation is results. So managers and coaches need to work their magic quickly and identify, obviously, the areas for growth and improvement and development, because a number of CEOs are not terribly patient, because winning obviously contributes to bigger crowds and merchandise sales and all those particular areas. So Yeah, look, I think there is a lot to learn from sport that is translated, even in education. I think because education, there's so many positive things about how schools operate and function, but there is at times a little bit of a reluctance to engage with high performance. And I think that comes from the fact that teachers by nature are incredibly caring and are very supportive of students. But ultimately in education, we want to provide that strong pastoral care, that caring, supporting environment. But we do want students to grow and perform in character, but also in terms of their learning. So schools have to be meticulous and clinical in being very clear in their strategy on what great classroom teaching and learning looks like, feels like, and create an environment where there is a quality teacher in every classroom, and that as educational practitioners, we can understand and gauge where we're having a profound impact in terms of growing student learning. And I think that that's starting to develop a lot more in education.
Yeah, I agree. That's really interesting perspective, Chris. I like it. As we fast forward in your career and you started, teaching and stepping into some leadership roles, what have been, are there any moments that you reflect on and think for you as a leader, you had a mentor or watched someone and you were just blown away with how well they dealt with the situation, or maybe there was something where you dropped the ball and made a mistake and it's been really pivotal and formative? Because I've certainly learned the most from my mistakes more than the best seasons. I don't know. Are there any moments like that stand out for you so far in your career?
Oh, look, there definitely were, and I've been very lucky in my teaching career because I started in a selective high school at Hurlstone Agricultural High School at Glenfield, and that was a strong academic school, and my first 4 years meant that I was surrounded by a lot of experience. I was certainly the youngest in the entire staffing department, and I just learned so much from great teachers who had a wealth of experience. But after that 4 years, I spent 12 years at the King's School at Parramatta, and I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Timothy Hawkes, who was the head of the King's School for 20 years, and in that 12 years. He provided me with a number of opportunities in leadership. I was a year coordinator, I was a housemaster, I was a head of department, and then I concluded my time there as a director of teaching and learning. And there's many times that I sit in my current chair as a principal, and I think back to a number of the conversations that I had with him and just the general observations of his leadership. And it was a real blueprint, I think, to a number of the important qualities and processes of what strong leadership looks like. And, a great principal at any school can have a significant influence in terms of the culture and the environment. And he had very clear pillars. It was a very clear vision that he was consistent on, and staff bought into that. And over that 12 years, having the very fortunate pleasure of being in a number of different portfolios, I was able to see just that level of impact that a strong mentor and leader can have, and as a result, a tremendous learning experience.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love hearing stories like that because I always love reminding listeners in these moments, because we all want to be that leader, right? We all want to be that leader that someone comes on the podcast, 15 years later or whatever it is and says, you know what, that leader, John O'White, he was the one that, and I think if we want to be that leader, it's worth paying close attention to what it is that all of us remember in our own leaders that we really admired. So thank you for sharing about that. I'm interested to know, are there any specific stories that come to mind from his leadership where you watched him? And it's always funny in these moments, the things that pop into our heads. So no pressure if you can't think of anything, but if you can, are there any moments that come to mind where you watched him navigate a situation and it really stuck with you with how he dealt with a parent or a student or the staff through a particular situation?
Yeah, no, look, I do, and it's quite a simple one, but it had a real impact on me. When I was director of teaching and learning, Tim popped into my office and said, "Can you can you join me in my office? I have the Director of Studies with me as well. I want to ask you a question. And it was in regards to a delicate matter regarding a student, and it was academically influenced. And we sat down, and Tim said, "Chris, we know this is the context. What are your thoughts?" And I gave my opinion, and then he asked the Director of Studies, "What do you think?" And he gave a similar opinion. And then Tim just sort of sat there and he sort of tilted his head thinking about it. And he summed up succinctly what we had said, but actually went another direction. And, in situations like that, you may perhaps feel, oh, well, I gave my opinion and he's gone the other way. But the way that he explained it, it was just terrific, because there was no doubt that he truly listened to us and he had considered that particular line of action. But through the decision that he made, he was able to demonstrate that he listened to us and that he understood that there were good points there, but gave the reasoning as to the way that he will go with that particular matter. And I just thought that was quite powerful, because I generally felt, as did the Director of Studies, that our view and opinion was always given great weight, and more often than not, he would agree with what we had said. But I like the fact that he's the leader. He was the headmaster, and he would listen to people, but ultimately he would make the decision. And I think that's so important in leadership. Leaders have to take accountability and responsibility for their decisions. They need to listen. They need to gauge the room and understand the context. But there comes a time where a decision needs to be made, and you need to move forward. And we both left that room, just like every conversation that we had, feeling that our opinion and perspective always counted. At this particular moment, it wasn't the way that he went, but again, I just thought it highlighted the real strength of quality leadership.
That is just a wonderful story. And yes, it's simple, but it is so profound. I can see why that had such an impact on you. I can imagine the leaders listening to this out on a jog, getting rid of a bit of a stress from the big day, or from a big day, or on their way home from work. And they're shaking their head going, oh my goodness, how did he do that? Like that's why it's so remarkable. And what I love about it, one of my favorite books, it's in my top 5, really is a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. And I love it as a way to approach strategic planning, but it's actually even richer than that. It just has great insights. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but you just nailed it you just reminded me so much with that story of the principles in the book that they talk about how to implement change. And they're talking about big transformation, turning a sporting club around, like level of we need to start getting results in 4 weeks. So that's the context, but I think it applies in all leadership situations. And they talk about this idea that if you want people to buy in like you did, and that's what I love about that story, you left the room after you'd shared your opinion and he went a different way, which is what I love so much. You left the room going, yeah, that was really considered. And that's what I think people will be shaking their heads going, how do I do that? And Blue Ocean Strategy has this great framework that they call FAIR process. And it's 3 E's. How do you achieve FAIR process? And this is why a lot of us as leaders, we can offend people and we wonder why. We're like, no, but I made the decision. But if we don't give people fair process, then no matter what the outcome is and whether it's right or wrong, people will feel like it was unfair, and there will be a lack of buy-in, and you really lose people. You definitely lose engagement. And the 3 E's is engage, explain, and expectations. And that story is, I'm probably going to use that story at some point. I think it's just so good, Chris. Coming into the office saying, come in, I want to get your opinion about this. So firstly, he engaged and he said, what do you think, Chris? And he said to the other Director of Studies, what do you think? And there was that engagement. Then the second step is explain. And we get afraid of this as leaders. We put our heads in the sand. We go, well, I know what I'm going to do and I don't want to offend anyone, so I won't ask them what they think. And then I don't want to explain it. But what he did is he said, okay, thank you. He thought about it. And then in a measured approach, in his own way, he's explained to both of you what his decision's going to be. And as a result, he's done then the third thing, which is expectation. So here's what it's going to look like very clearly. And you've walked out of there. And I think that's a great example of fair process, because even though he went a different way, you felt like the process was fair, and that particularly, like you said, that you felt heard.
Oh, that's right. And you're respected and you're valued. And at the end of the day, we're in it together in terms of making the best decisions for the well-being and learning of the students. And to be able to have that voice and that accessibility at that leadership level, that was a great experience. And there's many small conversations that took place of that nature where it was reaffirmed that you were a valued member of the team and of the leadership of the school.
That's just such a great story. Like I said, 100% I'll be using that as an example, because I think a lot of leaders, we get cynical and we get knocked around a bit and we do things the wrong way, or we have leaders who aren't great at some point leading us. And it's easy to believe it's just not possible. If I need to disagree with someone, there's no way to do that in a way that exactly what you said. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be a challenging story in the best way for a lot of listeners, myself included.
Oh, that's terrific. That's one of the joys of being in schools and leading is having those experiences and those opportunities to work with really good people and to make a valuable contribution. And I think we should never lose sight of that outcome.
So what about your I'm interested to know if there are any stories for you that are those sort of highlights where you felt like, just reminded you why you do what you do as a leader. Anything that's happened for you as a leader that really stands out as a story of why you get out of bed in the morning and love doing what you're doing as a school leader? Any stories come to mind from your time as a principal?
Oh, look, I think there are, but probably the most notable at this point of time is, I think, the Northholm story, because I was very, very fortunate to be appointed as the principal of Northholm. I was only 39 at the time, and obviously I had some experience on a senior executive team at a large independent school, but there was a lot of change that was required at that particular time. And I think now, looking back on that over the last 3 years, I think the fortunate part about that change was it actually had to happen very quickly. We didn't have time, and we had to make a number of changes in terms of our staffing model and the financial stewardship of the school, and we had to be very strategic in terms of the educational delivery and what the school stood for in terms of our education, and that meant that because there were a lot of hard decisions that had to be made, and that was all for the survival of the school. So it wasn't just decisions that had to be made to sort of move on to the next year. This was about surviving and hopefully in time thriving, and that experience of making those tough decisions and having really hard conversations with people, and then at the same time juggling the confidence within the community, because the change was so substantial that needing to really build that element of trust that I had built in the initial stages of my tenure, but to make it very clear to the community that there are good things that will happen in the future as a result of this. It has to happen, and almost a trust me attitude. And that particular time, Jono, we were only 390 students.
Wow.
Students, and academically we were ranked 308th in the state when I had arrived, and this year, last year's HSC group, we came 45th. So the educational sort of growth and trajectory and the alignment has simply been a result of our community. It's just an extraordinary community of students, teachers, and parents who, through a period of tremendous adversity, then with the pandemic hitting us the next year, there's a real sense of pride, I think, commenting on that journey and the fact that we've now moved from surviving to thriving, but that has its challenges because that needs to be sustained and that needs to be developed. And I think what I've learned from that, though, is that as a leader, you are responsible, you are accountable. And even though you're making tough decisions, you really deep in your heart need to consider people. And whilst those conversations and decisions are tough, I think you've always got to be committed to treating people with respect and dignity. And but then at the same time, I'm very, very conscious that what the vision is and what you say, you need to translate into action, because with that responsibility that you have of leading a school, you have to be leading the charge in terms of your behaviour, your actions. And what you say needs to happen needs to be led from the front. And with a bit of luck and a lot of hard work, you can get there. And the difference that has made to the school and to the lives of many of our students and families is incredibly uplifting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And it's that's a remarkable turnaround with the community, and to see some of those results must be incredibly satisfying.
It is, and I think, again, just reinforcing that the significance of community, bringing people together, and being fortunate within any particular context, having people that will support you and support the learning and the well-being of students, which is the paramount concern.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Chris. Thank you for sharing that. Let's jump into now Leadership Express. I've got a few questions for you. You ready?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, what's a book that you've gifted to other people?
There's a great book written by Stephen Dinham, which is called Leading, Learning and Teaching. And I think it's an absolute must read for every teacher from kindergarten to year 12. When I arrived at Northholm, it was the first book that I purchased for all our middle and senior leaders. And we would always start each meeting with a middle leader focusing on a chapter. And I still refer back to that book now, and will quite often provide a copy for new staff. I think it's almost the Bible for what school improvement, quality teaching, building student voice, all those key aspects of what should make a great school is all about.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And we have a lot of educational leaders. So I think there's going to be a bunch of people scribbling some notes and reading that. So thank you. That's fantastic. What about at the moment, are there any podcasts, books, journals, anywhere else that you're really enjoying listening and learning and reading or watching right now?
Because I travel quite a bit to and from school, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and on the weekends I like to get out for a walk. So podcasts are my thing at the moment. I really like the High Performance podcast, which is from the UK, and they interview a number of outstanding athletes and coaches and business leaders, and each podcast goes for about an hour. But it's just so fascinating listening to the stories and the experiences and what they value most about high performance. And another podcast that I'm really enjoying at the moment is the Presidents and Prime Ministers with Ian Dale. I love my politics, and Ian Dale started with an overview of each of the UK Prime Ministers, and he's now looking at the US president. So I find that really interesting, looking at their lives and then where they're ranked in regards to the surveys in terms of their contribution and impact.
Thank you for that. That's another wonderful recommendation. I haven't heard of that one. I've quoted this before, and this could be made up, but I believe it's a true quote from Abraham Lincoln. But one of my favorite things, I don't necessarily 100% agree with it, but it's such a thought-provoking idea. Is, I remember someone once told me that Abraham Lincoln would always stumble across, whenever he stumbled across someone that for some reason he really didn't like, he'd always say, for some reason, I really don't like this person, so I'm going to get to know them to find out why.
That would most likely be Lincoln. He's
Yeah.
fantastic, but an incredible sense of humour. And unfortunately, I'm waiting for the Lincoln episode.
Ah,
I think they'll probably ensure that that's towards the end.
yes,
And whilst most of them are between 30 minutes and an hour, I think the Lincoln episode will be a little bit like Churchill and Thatcher. We're probably looking at an hour and a half, 2 hours, because you
absolutely.
need all the time in the world to capture his life first and foremost, but certainly the contribution that he made as president.
Yeah, so many fascinating stories that I've heard about him, and I just love that idea that when someone really rubs us the wrong way, particularly as a leader, I think I'm learning more and more when I see something completely differently to someone to actually lean into it, and often I really believe in building teams where you don't necessarily, that's why I don't necessarily agree with it completely. There's someone's really annoying that you would go, oh, great, I'm going to put you on my team. But it's more like when someone sees something very differently to you, that's an opportunity. And particularly on your executive team, you want to have people that see the world have the same maybe values, core values and vision, but see things through different lenses. And it enriches your team meetings and your strategic planning, all of that so much more when you have people. So that's what that sort of quote reminds me of.
No, look, it's a good one, and in any team, and certainly at the senior level, you're quite right. You need that passion and enthusiasm and commitment from all your leaders, but you do want that difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And you want to ensure that you've got that environment where people can feel comfortable to voice those opinions, and that there's an element of challenge there all the time. So to ensure that the right decisions are made, and I think Lincoln will stand the test of time, but I think definitely during COVID, Lincoln continues to come back to the fore because he was a crisis leader, and he
Yes.
worked well with people, as you've indicated. He just had that ability to know and understand people, and as a result, get them to work for the cause.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, I'm definitely going to go and listen to that. Thank you. They're both great recommendations that I'm going to go and check out, because they sound like they'll be in my wheelhouse, and podcast is the main way I'm currently taking on a lot of information. So I love that. What about a recent leadership lesson that you've learned for the first time or been reminded of, Chris?
I think patience, which I've always been aware of. I'm a leader that likes to get things done, and quite often likes to get them done fast. But I think a recent lesson is just taking that time to assess all considerations, to listen to all perspectives, to seek to understand, and just sometimes it just needs that moment, that night's sleep to make the best decision, because I think if you don't do that, you can sometimes find yourself in a position where you don't have the level of conversations that you should with colleagues, and I think whilst patience is something that as a leader that you want to develop and improve. Recently there was just a decision there that I was probably too impulsive about, and we got there at the end. We got the right outcome, but I certainly learned from that I could have personally handled that a little bit better in terms of just taking that time to assess and weigh up all options before coming to the final outcome.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. Thank you for sharing that. You reminded me, as well as you shared that, of something that I heard in a recent podcast from one of my guests, and I said to him at the time, and people can go and check it out, Emil Sayegh, Emil Sayegh, Sayegh. So he said in our interview, he used this analogy of a boat, and what you just talked about there really reminded me of what he said, because he said, in leadership, I love the analogy of a boat, that you've got things above sea level and things below sea level. And for me, I'd never heard this before. Other people might have. And he said, what really helps me work out whether sometimes I find it hard to work out when it's okay to be more impulsive or to give people more sort of rope to really run with things and when I should be more careful. That's something I've struggled with in the past, and I love a good framework. So I found this really helpful. And he said, when something's above sea level, it's not going to sink the boat. So it's like when you're putting some hooks in the wall to hang a picture in the, in the cabin, it's like those sort of decisions, let people run. You can sort of not worry so much about the impact and really, let things go. But whenever it's something that's under the sea level, where if we get this wrong, it can really bring a lot of water and create a lot of havoc and really even potentially sink the boat, they're the things that you really want to be especially slow moving on. And I was just like, I've never heard that. I love that idea of asking, is this something that's above sea level or below? And sometimes going, oh, actually, this is probably below. And I was about to jump into something that maybe needs a lot more thought, or why am I taking this so seriously? Or I've just got a big opinion about this that the person I'm leading wants to do. I'm just going to let them run with it because it's an above sea level thing, and let's see what happens, and allow them to fail. So that's something else to add into that thought. But I love that idea of learning patience. That's great, Chris, especially for a transformational leader like you, where you've come in and really transformed. I can see why, because so much of transformation has to happen fast when you're really coming in to do a lot of fast work. So that's a great thought.
That's right, and that is a really good analogy. And frameworks are always good to work within, especially when it comes to the decision making processes. And that's the beauty of leadership. You're always learning, and part of that learning, I think, is the reflection that is vital in terms of recognizing when things are going well and when things can be done better.
Absolutely. So here's another question. Do you have any favorite questions that you ask when you're in a one-on-one with someone, when you're in a meeting? Are there any go-to questions that Chris tends to use because you've just found them really, really helpful?
I like to ask people, what are you passionate about? And I know it's a simple one, but I think that everyone has something or a number of particular hobbies or activities or routines or processes about what they love, what they're passionate about, and more specifically is asking people what they're passionate about at work, because there's a lot of responsibilities in everyone's portfolio and what they're looking after, and the reality is that we don't love all of it, and we're not meant to. It's just not the way it works. But we certainly have to have enough things that we're passionate about and that we love, that we really get excited about in regards to our work and our lives. And I find that question really allows you to know and understand a lot about the person and what drives them, what makes them tick. And I think that's really important in understanding how you can assist them and develop them within the school environment.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a great question to ask is existing people on your team. And even it's funny when I work with executive teams, and one of the things I love doing, and really most of what I do is actually very simple, to be honest, but it's often difficult. And so this one isn't that difficult, but it's really just, even when you go around and you ask about hobbies or, just something where, and people will roll their eyes like, oh, come on, Jono. Like, we all know we've been working in a team. This team's been together 6 years. Yes. And it's a bit like that with what are you passionate about? It's funny how stuff goes under the radar and you go, what, you play squash? You played squash at competitive level? I didn't know that. How did I not know? You're a musician. You have a band? What? And that's, like, people might wonder, well, what's that got to do with strategy or with leadership? But it's understanding each other better and really knowing how we work and actually taking the time to get to know each other and building that connection that I think facilitates a lot of those robust discussions that lead to great decisions as a company.
And sadly, it happens all too often. How you described it in schools and organisations where people can be working together for a number of years and not know the person, who they are and what they do outside. And it's just so limiting, first and foremost, from a personal perspective, but also from a professional one, because we don't just bring You know, we don't just come to work as our work person. we come to work as who we are, and you know, it's all back to that point, I think, about you know, work-life balance, which I think is rather work-life integration. We don't have two cups that we're supporting. You know, we've got the work cup and got to make sure that's right, and then we've got the life cup. At the end of the day, it's one. But it's how we integrate it. How do we manage what we need to do well at work, but at the same time spend time with our spouses, our partners, and our children, and be engaged in all those fantastic activities. That's the integration side. I think that's important, and I think it really helps if we truly know people that we're working with.
I agree. I remember chatting with someone about work-life balance, and he said to me, because I was saying, oh yeah, I really think work-life balance is important to me. Like, it's really important that I have my work, you know, really balanced with my life. And he's like, what is it about your work that you dislike so much that you got to keep it so separate from your life?
That's
I thought that's such a good question. And you know what, to be honest, since I started Clarity, I've found that I haven't needed to think about work-life balance, because for me doing this, it's felt very natural to have work-life integration. And to be honest, it also lends itself to that more because I'm running my own business, which has its pros and cons. But one of the advantages is it can be more flexible. But that's something that I've definitely been challenged about. And I've probably changed my opinion on that. And I tend to agree with you that work-life integration is a more accurate and realistic idea than this idea of some work-life balance with two cups.
Yeah, I think it's the other point that can sort of be extended to that is living a life of healthy motion. And I like that term that I'd heard once, and that is that you know, there's a number of activities and responsibilities that we have, but maintaining that healthy motion so that we prioritise, we know what we need to master and what we need to achieve, and as a result, I think that builds human flourishing, but it also builds genuine resilience, and I think that's actually critical within our education process too. I think teaching those skills and having those conversations with students is incredibly important so that they can successfully make that transition from school to life.
Yeah, they're good thoughts, Chris. What is a commonly held belief in education that you passionately disagree with?
Oh, I think learning styles. I think the idea that students and humans in general learn differently, and that we need to, you know, some people are visual and some people, you know, like handouts and those sorts of things. I think that's been debunked, and I think that can be quite dangerous. I think we now have enough educational research and evidence in knowing what truly works in terms of the learning process. It's about high expectations. It's about explicit teaching. It's about ensuring that students understand and can build knowledge, so they can understand content, they can build knowledge, and that with knowledge they can then develop the skills and dispositions like critical thinking and problem solving. And we can certainly establish a personalised learning environment where we're attending to students' needs and interventions in terms of how we can improve their growth in learning, but the concept that there's different learning styles, I think, is something that can potentially be quite dangerous. And a really good teacher in the classroom has the capacity to grow and develop the students in their care through a variety of strategies that allows them to be the best possible learner that they can become.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting. Last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
I think be present, be authentic, and be passionate. I think presence is crucial in leadership.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think as you move through higher positions from a school perspective anyway, I think that one of the problems is that you can be sometimes caught too much on the balcony and not on the dance floor. and you need to get that right. Colleagues, students, parents, they need to see you. They need to know that you're present. I try as much as possible to be at the buses in the morning and in the afternoon, to get to the co-curricular activities, to visit classrooms. Morning tea and lunchtime, unless I've got meetings, I'll wander around the school. I think it's so important that the students and the staff are constantly seeing me, that I'm part of the school environment. And I just think in any leadership role, being present is crucial. I think being authentic is crucial. You have to be yourself. Be proud of who you are. And we have a lot of discussions about weaknesses and how do we develop how do we develop limitations? But we should be spending far more time on strengths and celebrating the strengths and recognising that the great opportunities for growth is through our strengths, what we're good at. And I think that if we've got a sense of comfort in who we are, in our sense of humour, in the way we approach others, and we're authentic, then people will be more inclined to trust you and to put their faith in your leadership. And I think passion's crucial in life. You've got to love what you're doing, and sometimes it's difficult when you've had a tough day to maintain that passion, or at least that appearance. But if you're energetic and enthusiastic and passionate, that's contagious, and that just resonates so neatly throughout the school or the organisation. So be present, be authentic, be passionate.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. I love that as a finishing point. For those who have just really enjoyed what you've said and might want to reach out and thank you, or just find out more about your school, and what are the ways in terms of LinkedIn or anything else that people can find or connect with you online, Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Jono. So Northholm Grammar is on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. So you just need to look up Northholm Grammar, and obviously we have the school website, which you can easily navigate at www.northholm. I think it's nsw.edu.au, but that's obviously a great way of learning and understanding a little bit more about the school. But we're definitely on those key social media forums.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Great thoughts today, great stories as well. It's just been a lot of fun. And for our listeners, don't forget, I also have the Jono White Leadership Podcast, where I give you tips for casting vision and how to build a high performance team and how to become a better storyteller and those sort of things. And also leadership question of the day, a different question every day to help you as a leader grow in your leadership, to put a stone in your shoe, so to speak. And we need to be uncomfortable to grow. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Chris for being so generous with your time, for sharing so vulnerably. And I think it's going to encourage a lot of people. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Chris.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, John O'White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out John O'White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.